everybody. This is the Queens Off the Clock, and Sam and I are back for part two of the Amy Bradley Netflix series. If you haven't listened to our first episode regarding this docu-series that just got released on Netflix and is in the top 10 on Netflix, then we highly encourage you to go back and listen to that. But if you're just new with us, then go ahead and start here, and then it's always fun to work your way back.
Yeah, and on the previous episode, we talked about part one of the three-part series on Netflix. Today, we're going to get into part two, which is where we start to get some interesting developments with people who are alleging that they saw Amy Bradley after her disappearance.
And for those that did not, again, really quick, have a summary, anything to know about this case, in a brief summary, this was a 23-year-old woman that was just graduating college that went on a cruise to the Caribbean with her mom and her dad and her brother. And on, I think it was like the second or third day, she actually went missing following an evening with dinner with her family and going to the club with her brother. And it is kind of in question what exactly was the last time that anybody saw her. But that is just a brief synopsis. And so we're going to take it from the point that the cruise ship docked in Curacao.
Taking a quick step back, before the cruise ship docked, the night of her disappearance, Amy was seen with Yellow Douglas before her disappearance. So there was some potential controversy or concern that he may have somehow been involved because he was dancing with her prior to or the night of her disappearance.
And he was the lead singer for the band that was at the bar on the cruise ship. So he technically was an employee of the cruise line.
Yeah. And then once sort of the media went live about this case, there started to be, again, some potential sightings. So the first one we really hear about is a taxi driver who claims to see her on Curacao after the sighting, which would clock her as not only being on land, but also being somewhere other than the typical theory that she maybe fell off the balcony the night before. This shows her alive thereafter. The question is this taxi driver someone that's credible and believable? Is it someone that definitely saw her? And that raised some concerns for me. I don't know that I have a total opinion either way, but it's always concerning to me when there's an eyewitness. How sure are they? And if they're not sure, are we maybe following a lead down the wrong?
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, I went back and watched the series. I started it again, after we did the first set of shows, because I just wanted to go back. And every time I go back and I watch these, and I'm infamous for watching movies over and over and over again. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen the movie Cool Runnings, probably at least 50 to 100. But every time you go back, you pick up on something that you missed, or you look at a different piece of evidence differently, and you're kind of like, okay, beyond, is he credible? How factual is he? How sure is he? Is this someone who might have saw, an American woman in Curacao? Or is it maybe it was a duplicate or a lookalike, or he wasn't super sure? But when you go back and you watch this again, I mean, he is 100% sure it was her.
Yeah, and the questions I have is, why would she go the other way if she asked a question as to where the phone was? I didn't really track that or understand that. Certainly you don't know who's behind a building or who's telling her to do what, but that was the only witness for me that I was a little confused by the story, really, because it just didn't really make sense that if somebody was away from the people that had maybe taken her, or if she was in trouble looking for a phone, that she would go the opposite way. So that one raised a little bit of concern for me. But I think the next one we hear about is...
Wait, real quick, Sam, because it's funny that you say that. Because when I went back and watched it last night, that was the one issue I put next to that witness was the phone. And I actually thought about it a little deeper. And obviously, these are speculations. These are our opinions. There are not specific facts of what was going on in Amy Bradley's mind during this conversation with the taxi driver. But based on what Sam and I do, being attorneys, we do have the ability to kind of think beyond the obvious. And something I came up with in my head, again, is that maybe she wanted to know where the nearest phone was, but she was being watched at that existing moment. And so I just kind of thought, like, okay, so maybe she's asking where, but the eyes are on her right now and they're watching her, and maybe she just is supposed to be hailing a cab, or my guess is she had eyes on her quite a bit by these men that all witnesses say or testify that she was with men, and usually more than one, two or three is kind of what we're getting. But that was the only thing I thought. But it's funny that you raised that, because that literally was the one issue that I pulled from that taxi driver as well.
So I think that's a really interesting point. Honestly, there doesn't necessarily need to be an answer to the question why somebody couldn't maybe at that time ask for help. You also don't know if they're in a position to really ask for help or why at that point. So I think that that brings up a good point, and I think we have to be careful speculating too hard on, well, if she wasn't in trouble, why wouldn't she ask for help? I think
100%.
kind of goes back to that same reasoning we talked about yesterday when we were talking about how, like, well, she must have fallen off or she could have done this. It's like, well, just because you think that doesn't necessarily mean it true, and if you believe too much one fact, it kind of halts the idea that something else could have happened to her. We're only able to go off the facts that are presented to us. So you don't know, maybe there was another sentence in there that would have made it make a little more sense that the taxi driver forgot, because I certainly don't remember every conversation that I have with everyone, even if I try to or try not to misrepresent things. But the next part is sort of a little segment about a man who found her in what was
A
somewhat of
brothel.
a brothel. Yeah, or it sounded like.
It's an illegal bar with a bar up top and a hotel on the bottom. So use your best imagination of what that would be, but it's something in alignment with a brothel.
And this witness for me was and remains frustrating. And if any of the witnesses end up watching us, they're probably going to notice that I'm irritated at them all. And I get it. If I'm not in that person's shoes, maybe I would have acted differently. But I just don't understand the humanity portion of it, because it sounds like she really said something along the lines of that she needs help. And so the idea that you maybe are not wanting to quote unquote tell on yourself for being somewhere you shouldn't. Okay, I'm not really buying that. What I don't understand is, why can't you make an anonymous tip? Why can't you contact someone and not give your name? Why can't you say that your friend told you that they saw her and to go check on her or see what's going on? I certainly don't know how it works in Curacao. I don't know what the authorities are and things like that, but I do struggle with the gap with the witnesses and the gap between seeing something and saying something. And it sounds silly, but you never know what saying something can do and how that could seriously change an investigation and change the investigation lifetime, because I keep feeling like more could have been done and it's harder to come to the truth years and decades now later.
I agree. You're always trying to put yourself back in that position and you don't remember, it's always like the five senses, right? Like everything about, you don't remember that as time goes on. Like you don't remember exactly what you were doing, what the texture of the car or what you were touching, or what were you hearing. There's just so many facts that go into every single conversation. I think what frustrates me with this witness is he saw that there were two men with weapons that were with her. So to me, it was, he knew that there was very likely a safety concern. He knew it was an American woman. She said she needed help, and he saw two men with weapons. So on one hand, I get that everyone wants to, obviously protect their own personal safety as well. But I do agree that that request for help was actually backed up by what he saw. The other two witnesses, they saw two or three men with her, but they didn't necessarily say that they saw weapons. So this guy actually knew, in my opinion, that it was a legitimate safety concern. And I have to recall, when did he actually come forward with this evidence? Was it when this documentary was released, or was it prior to?
I don't recall that.
Yeah, because that always gets me going. Who's paying for this person to be here? Are they being paid to be on this show? So always that gives rise to questions that Sam and I ask in our head, just because we have that attorney background, and we always take things at face value, and then we start asking the tough questions. We start thinking outside the box, and we encourage every one of you to do it. Like Sam said, we're not here to solve the case. We're here to question everything. we want you to grab your headphones and maybe just, the joy of life and just go down this rabbit hole with us and ask questions. That's all we want you to do. Think outside the box.
Yeah, and so I just looked it up on the interweb, and it looks like he came forward a couple of years afterwards. So he's claiming that this happened in January of 1999 when he saw Amy Bradley, and he did not come forward until May of 2002. And
Okay, but
so
that's still way sooner than the doc. I was thinking that was my recollection. I just was hoping it wasn't for this documentary.
yeah, it just again, I mean, you commend him for coming forward. I guess there's certainly witnesses that either haven't come forward because they're scared to, and that is probably very true. I'm assuming that all the people that saw Amy Bradley in distress have not also come forward and or are not in a position to come forward and or don't know how to come forward, at least at this point. That
Mhm.
still frustration is there for me though, because several years later, it makes 100% of the issue for me.
Imagine if they actually, told everybody on the ship, like we were talking about yesterday, if they actually had process and procedure to handle something like this. I mean, when I watched that part again, I was like, it just gets worse and worse when you keep watching it because then you just start hearing everything more clear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this couldn't have been handled more wrong, in my opinion. And when they set the family home, holy moly, I was like, Sam would have been out there representing me because I would have probably had to been physically forced off the island.
Yeah, you were not probably going to come home knowing you, but you don't know the circumstances,
Yeah, I
especially
don't.
back then. There's a lot of difference in media, blogging, online. We have a much bigger community now where people kind of know what you do in a situation like that. I don't know if
Yeah.
you even know what to do back then or have any idea, but I think this brings up a good point about the credibility of witnesses in court. And it's something that Kristen and I deal with a lot when we're litigating is how credible is a witness, especially because human memory can kind of change, even if you're repeating the same story over and over again. Sometimes even like in an innocent manner, you change the facts. And so that's why it's so important that if you're a witness to something that you come forward and you come forward quickly. And I know you may be concerned about the potential exposure to you, but the truth is you can leave an anonymous tip. You can do things that don't necessarily involve you totally in it. And even if not, write down what you saw. Like you want to keep a track of things, even just in court litigation. If you have the ability to obtain evidence, you want to obtain it as close to the time of the incident as possible. And it sounds like, unfortunately, that really was not done in this case.
Yeah, I actually encourage anyone that I work with, whether it's clients or just even friends that go through something of a traumatic experience and they want to document it, is I think you should write it down and you should also dictate it on your phone like a voice note because it comes through two different ways. When you write it, you're looking at more of like the visual experience. What were people wearing? Where was I? What was the temperature? Was there any loud noises? Did it smell? But then when you're talking, it's almost adds like a whole other element to what you were feeling at the time. And those are good if you have to refer back to that experience or that event when sometimes it's a year later, sometimes it's 6 months later, sometimes it's 20 years later.
So, Kristen, what do you think about? There was a lot of talk about how the family who was interviewed really was discussing the potential that Amy Bradley was abducted. They certainly rejected the first set of theories that unfolded in part one, that she had either done some sort of active self-harm or had accidentally fallen from the cruise ship. So what was your thought with the family's theory?
It wasn't, I didn't really feel either way at the beginning because she was only gone for a short period of time initially. But obviously, I was, you're thinking in your head either these people are certifiably crazy or, hey, maybe there is trafficking going on. I mean, that was I was already leading toward that in my head. And before there was even any facts given that she followed someone to go by or went off the ship, I will get into that later. But even when I heard that, I was already kind of possibly thinking that she maybe went with someone to continue the party. I don't know. I wasn't feeling super concrete at this point, but I did think that there was enough there to think that there's a plausible alternative.
Yeah, I think that when you're looking for a missing person, unless you have some pretty serious evidence that she's no longer with us, I don't think you can afford to stay on those first theories.
No, I agree.
Because that is a different investigation. That's a who did it investigation. And we're not actually there yet, you know? And so even though it's been all these years, we're in what happened. And if we're still in what happened, I think it's dangerous to ignore the theories that could result in her return. You really feel for the family in this situation, because if your two theories are that she's no longer with us or that she is with us, you have to follow the second set, the second possibility. You can't really spend time on the first, because that would be quite literally a waste of time and a waste of
Mhm.
manpower. I understand that it's a cold case and it's been all these years and it's been decades and decades, but she's still missing. So I just think that it's a waste, and it's candidly lazy if you don't have serious evidence that she's no longer here to just stop there. And I think that a lot of people did stop there,
Oh, I
especially early
agree.
on in the investigation.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we didn't have a body. We didn't have basically footprints. I mean, we truly had, we can't find her, and we were on a boat. So there's either an option that she got off the boat willingly or unwillingly, or she was still on the boat. I mean, those are really, it's, or that she fell over. But I do believe that if it wasn't for her family's convictions and her family literally setting up their own command system and reaching out with all of the different authorities and agencies. And you'd have to think you're working with international, governmental agencies as well, because we're in another country. And on one hand, I praise her family for everything they've done. And then on the other hand, it pulls at my heartstrings going, this is 25 years is a really long time to expect someone to make a return. But I agree. To this day, there's not enough evidence to say that she is 100% not with us.
Yeah, no, and I certainly agree with that. And I think from just a litigation perspective and an investigation perspective, there needs to be more done. And I still think that's true today on it. And I'm hopeful that with the platforms that are sort of circulating around YouTube and Netflix, that there are still some witnesses that you haven't really heard from yet that have seen some stuff, because I'm willing to bet there are a
Oh, I
lot of
agree.
that know stuff.
I 100% agree. And it's almost like, there's been many cases over the last year that I just feel like at some point, some agency dropped the ball a little bit. And a lot of these are just basic things. I think that's happening right now. But I think in every true crime, I think you can look at this and go, why was this person not interviewed? Why wasn't this done sooner? Why was this not made available to the public? Why were we not connecting all these dots? Why did it take 6 months? I don't even get me started, the Idaho 4 case, because I think that there was a lot of stuff that wasn't tested for DNA. I think there was a lot of stuff that people that weren't cleared or people that weren't heavily investigated. And then it's like when you're trying to do it 2.5 years later, you have similar problems, It's like, but at the Travis Decker case, you know, allegedly unalived his 3 daughters following a pretty high conflict divorce, who's actually still running in the wild and has not been able to be detained. It's like, how did we get to that point? There was actually a family law case going through the family law court. How did so many people get this wrong?
Mhm.
I want to look into how many experts, were there any experts involved? Did they recommend, that he should have X amount of times? I know that mom was making some pretty serious claims and allegations to the court that he was suffering from PTSD. And that's a whole other show. But just align with points. It's like, sometimes just sitting back, and I know it's always hindsight, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but I see a theme that there's always more that can be done.
Yeah, and I understand that there are issues with resources, but when you have a missing person, there's still a missing person. So I think it's a very dangerous thing to do, is to just say, well, because we haven't figured it out, or because our investigation we feel was due
Yeah, yeah.
diligence, then we just conclude, okay, it is what it is, move on. I think that that's very dangerous, especially when it comes to any human life in general. And so I can't even imagine being the family trying to get an answer. You're still actively trying to find your sister, your daughter, your friend, your significant other, and everyone's moved past it. So that's, I think, the problem.
No, I agree. But can I tell you the one thing that I thought that the cruise ship royally screwed up? Besides not telling people that we had a missing family member and not saying that they wouldn't make that announcement because everybody else was still having fun and on a cruise and paid thousands of dollars. And I'm sitting there going, this is crazy. But when I found out that the cleaning service had cleaned the room in between the time that dad is saying Amy's gone as of 6 a.m., right? He thinks he saw her part of her body on the cabin balcony. That they were all sharing together, mind you. Those, if you've been on a cruise, those are some tight quarters for 4 adults, right? But he believes firmly in his conviction that he saw her 5:30, so 6 a.m. hour. We can't find Amy. That's when the search starts with at least the family members. Sometime between then and later that day, the cabin was cleaned by the cleaning service. So if there was any DNA on a cigarette, because, they were, or she was at least a smoker, an ashtray, if there was any fingerprints, anything, if there was a person with her, or that had, say, you need to go to your room and get your things because we're leaving, or else I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to your family. And again, those are just thoughts, speculations, thinking outside the box. But why would you have a cabin cleaned in that day?
You shouldn't even let people off the boat.
Agreed.
If you want to pause and say, hey, every time someone tells us they're missing someone, that happens 5 times a day, and give a solid 30 minutes to it, I guess I can get that. But what I can't get is how you continue on from a safety perspective without stopping the boat. The boat should not have allowed people off. No one should have been able to get off that boat. That is a potential inconvenience, sure, but they can still carry on with their cruise behaviors while everyone is still locking down the boat. The fact that everyone gets off the boat and then they're searching, it's like, okay, well, now we've just taken an investigation where maybe we could have concluded that weekend, and we've just put a million possibilities of where and what happened at play. I don't know the legality of the lawsuit, but it
sounds to me like they should talk to a couple more attorneys with modern time, with what's going on now. I know I believe it was filed like early 2000s or even late 90s. I have to I'll pull it up for the next show. And I do know that they lost, and it was a wrongful death case against Royal Caribbean. And I know they lost. However, I do think with new information, new witnesses coming forward, new facts, I do believe it would be worth a couple consults to see if there was anything there to potentially refile.
Yeah, and it becomes difficult because obviously we can't retry the same issues.
Yeah.
And we don't know any of the real specifics regarding that or the statute of limitations associated with that. But Kristen brought up a great point, is that you never know what avenues are potentially out there. And you never know what causes of action could happen. And so that's why it's always great to talk to an attorney.
Yeah. And just because you can't refile for the wrongful, like you can't maybe do the wrongful death, but maybe, there are a plethora of civil actions that you may be able to be compensated for. And I'm not saying that would ever make up for someone being gone for 25 years, especially a family member. But it often brings a lot more attention to the media. It brings a lot more awareness to the case. And so I do think it's worth a couple consults. And no, we are not civil attorneys. We are not criminal attorneys. We are actually certified family law specialists in the state of California. We just, again, we're encouraging everyone to ask these hard questions to themselves. If you just are told something and you're like, okay, she fell off. Okay, she committed suicide. I think without having more information, I think that those two notions they could be contradicted in some way and actually make you think, okay, let's go to the next step. What are the other options? And yeah, that's where I have so many issues with the way, just like you, Sam, with the way that the cruise handled this. Because I think, like you just said, it could have been over in maybe a couple weeks. We could have had a more definitive answer what was going on versus 25 years later.
Yeah, definitely. And we look forward to, I think we're running out of time for today, but we look forward to going over the last segment of the Amy Bradley case and many other cases. If you are one of those witnesses that hasn't come forward, yeah, it's been a long time, but you have absolutely no idea how much one fact could change the whole investigation. Even if you feel like, I don't want people to judge me that I haven't come forward for 20 years. So what? Let us judge you. Just come forward and provide that info.
What do they say? No fact is too small, right? Everyone, we got a weekend coming up. Why don't you go watch? And we, again, are not here to solve it. We're here to question everything. So grab your headphones, grab your glass of wine, join us because we're going to deep dive further into the Motion's most haunting mystery on our next show.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
Bye.